In Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet, many moves were removed from the game, most of which are very unlikely to be seen again. In this video, I'm going to go through these moves, try to explain why they might have been chosen to be removed, whether they were moves that no one used, or if Game Freak might have removed them for balancing reasons, and also highlight any effects that the move's removal might have had on competitive play. Few clarifications. One, I consider a move to have been removed if it is not in Scarlet and Violet. A lot of these moves were in Legends ZA, but there were also moves that were removed in Sword and Shield, which were put into Legends Arceus, which were then removed again in Scarlet and Violet. Second, I'm going to be excluding moves which are only on Pokemon that themselves are not in the game. This is a lot of signature moves on Pokemon that are not in Scarlet and Violet. And lastly, I'm not defending Game Freak's decision to remove these moves. I'm just trying to give my best explanation as to why these moves were chosen over other ones. Our first category of removed moves is niche gimmicks. These are moves that have very specific effects or activation conditions that prevent them from ever really seeing use, making it easier for Game Freak to justify their removal. First up is Bide. Bide is a fairly recognizable move, but it is pretty bad and gets outclassed by Counter, Mirror Coat, and Metal Burst. There isn't really a way to make it better that doesn't just turn it into one of the aforementioned moves, so it was easy to cut. Camouflage converts your type to reflect whatever surface you are battling on. If you're in grass, you'll become a grass type. If you're surfing, you'll become a water type. This does not have many implications in battle, and it would hardly ever see use. Camouflage does raise the question as to why Conversion and Conversion 2 were not removed. They do something pretty similar and are also pretty unlikely to have much of an effect on a battle, but they made it in. My guess is that Game Freak wanted to keep all the moves that they could in and decided that if one of them had to go, it would be Camouflage. There's also the option that because Camouflage requires the game to know what kind of surface you are battling on, they did not want to have to keep implementing whatever check or tracker they were using in the code of the game to accomplish this. That same sort of reasoning can also be applied to Nature Power and Secret Power. Captivate harshly reduces the special attack stat of the target, but only if they have the opposite gender. Captivate is unreliable because of this activation condition and gets outclassed by moves such as Mystical Fire, Spirit Break, Snarl, and Eerie Impulse. Crafty Shield protects the users and its allies from status moves. Ultimately, Game Freak decided that it was not worth keeping in the game, but I think it fits in well with both Wide Guard and Quick Guard and should not have been removed. Especially because Fairy Lock is still here. In competitive, this move did not quite have the distribution that it needed to be as good as Wide Guard, but it's still a respectable move that's useful for disrupting prankster Pokemon. Embargo prevents the target Pokemon from using its held item or having bag items used on it. Not being able to use bag items doesn't affect competitive play at all. But ultimately, in both the RPG side and the competitive side, Knockoff and Magic Room do the same effect, but offer more. Ultimately, this move was just not needed. Flower Shield raises the defense stats of all grass types on the field by one stage. If the poor performance of Florges was any sort of indicator, effects that only help out one type are just not the best. It was niche and easy to cut. For the same reasons, Rototiller, a move which increases the attack and special attack stat of grass types, was also easy to leave out. Foresight and Odor Sleuth both allow normal and fighting types to hit ghost types, and Miracle Eye allows dark types to be hit with psychic type moves. All three moves also cause attackers to ignore the target's evasion. These moves are cool in theory, but their main drawback is that the move slot could instead be taken up by a dark or fighting move and be more effective. As an ability, like Mind's Eye, the effect is pretty good, but as a move, it was not that needed. Heal Block prevents the target from being healed or using any moves which could heal it. For example, Giga Drain cannot be used while you are heal blocked. The effect itself is not bad, but never really saw use on its own. It would later come back in the form of Psychic Noise, which is a niche but respectable move that sees a little bit of usage. Ion Deluge, Lucky Chant, Magic Coat, and Nightmare all exist in other forms, being Plasma Fist, Shell Armor, Battle Armor, Magic Bounce, and Bad Dream. Not only were they hardly ever used, but cutting them doesn't entirely prevent their effects from being accessible in the game. It only affects the level of accessibility, even if it does do this quite drastically in some cases. I do know that Magic Coat Deoxys was used in some Ubers formats, and Lucky Chant seems to be a niche tech that could have been brought against Urshifu, so the removal of these specific moves does matter, but probably only slightly. Laser Focus causes the user's attacks on the next turn to always crit. This move was introduced in Generation 7, meaning that you're spending 2 turns to do 1.5 times damage. Any D&D players will be able to see the similarities between this and True Strike, and immediately know why it could be cut so easily. It's kind of useful for bypassing defense boosts, but if you want a move to do that, just bring a haze user and clear the boost for everyone. Natural Gift is a move that changes type and power based on the berry the user is holding. The issue is that a Pokemon holding a berry typically wants to use it, and it's usually not worth it to give up an item slot and a move slot for a one-time use move, even if that move can be 100 base power of any type, which that's really good. Punishment is the inverse of stored power, where it gets stronger the more stat boost the target has, though in practice the move is much worse than stored power, simply because in order for it to be effective, your opponent needs to have a lot of stat boost, which is already bad for you. And once you clear the target, now you just have a pretty weak dark type move. Spotlight is the opposite of Follow Me, where you can cause another Pokemon to become the center of attention. It seems like there would be some application for this considering how good Redirection is in Double, because Follow Me is just one of the best moves ever, but Spotlight has no niche at all. If you use it on an opposing Pokemon, that Pokemon's ally Pokemon doesn't get redirected into it. It only causes your other Pokemon to attack it, which you control where that Pokemon attacks in the first place. And if you use it on your ally, it's probably because you want to keep whatever Pokemon that is using the move safe, in which case you could just click Protect. I see why this move was thought of and put in the game, but I also see why it was removed after just one generation. And that's kind of it for the moves that I put in this category that I have really anything interesting to say about. So for the remaining moves, we'll do a quick lightning round. Trump Card, which increases in power the less PP it has to a maximum of 200 at 0 PP remaining. Venom Drench, which reduces the attack, special attack, and speed of all opposing poisoned Pokemon. And lastly, Ring Out, which has more base power the more HP the target has. And that's it for all of our niche gimmick categories. You will see moves later on that could go into this category and another one, but I just chose to keep them all in their own individual categories. At this point, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel and hype the video. Both of those things really help me out a lot. Thank you. Our second category is moves that just have too much overlap with other moves that are in the game and could be let go while having some kind of replacement. This does not mean that all the moves are exact one-to-one copies of each other, just that they are similar in some regard. Aromatherapy is a grass-type version of Heal Bell. Its removal does mean that many grass types lost access to this effect, but there was also quite a bit of overlap in Pokemon that could get both Heal Bell and Pokemon that could get Aromatherapy. Autotomize is put on a lot of Pokemon that get Rock Polish. There are not a lot of Autotomized Pokemon that don't have Rock Polish, but there are a lot of Rock Polish Pokemon without another speed boosting move. So it seems to me that they took away the one that caused less Pokemon to lose access to this kind of move. Barrage, Comet Punch, Double Slap, and Spike Cannon all see overlap with moves like Fury Attack, Fury Swipes, and Tail Slap. There didn't need to be 7 normal type multi-hit moves, even if they all have a little bit of variety, like how Spike Cannon is 100% accuracy and has more base power than the others that got deleted. If you consider Fury Attack and Fury Swipes to be the base for this kind of move, then the only one that got kept is Tail Slap, which is a direct upgrade from those, so it makes more sense from like an RPG progression standpoint. Barrier is a bit of a stretch as to which move it overlaps with. Iron Defense and Acid Armor don't have that much learn set overlap with Barrier, so I don't see them as ample replacements. Reflect is the closest one, but it acts so differently due to it being a screen and not a stat boost. Also, if this is the case, then Amnesia should have gotten deleted as well. Reflect is my best guess, but I think it's a little more likely that it got deleted because they didn't feel like Psychic having a Phys boosting move was the most fitting, and ultimately they probably just had to make a certain amount of cuts. Chip Away, Dizzy Punch, Secret Power, and Smelling Salts are all 70 base power normal type moves that compete with Slash, Headbutt, Facade, and Retaliate. They ended up cutting the ones that are the least distributed, well-known, and viable. Retaliate probably also could have been removed by this logic. Clamp is only available to Pokemon that get Whirlpool, and it does the exact same thing. There's a slight difference because Clamp is physical and normal, and Whirlpool is water and special, but the main attraction of these trapping moves is not the damage. Feint Attack has the same base power as Bite, which is more distributed and more well-known. Flame Burst kinda has overlap with Incinerate and Flamethrower, but not really. This move, along with Signal Beam, I think actually provide a useful stepping stone from 40 or 50 base power moves to the 90 base power moves like Flamethrower and Bug Buzz, so I really don't think they should have been removed. Flash has a readily available replacement in Sand Attack, and doesn't have any out-of-battle use now that field moves and HMs have been phased out of the game. Hail got renamed more than it got removed, but technically the old move Hail will still fail. Heal order got cut, but attack and defend order didn't. At first, I thought this was because Vespukin gets Roost, but it actually lost Roost in Gen 8 as well because it could only learn it from a TM, and this move got removed as a TM in Gen 8. It eventually did get Roost as a level up move in Gen 9, which makes me think this is correct and they just forgot it couldn't learn it naturally. Magnitude is basically outdone by Bulldoze, which is usually a TM move. It also kind of fits into the gimmicky category. Me First and Mirror Move are both kind of like Copycat, but work slightly different. They do have quite a bit of overlap with Copycat, but I think their use is different enough to say that Copycat doesn't quite fit the exact same niche. Last in this category, Mind Reader and Telekinesis overlap with Lock On. Although Telekinesis does cause a Pokemon to become not grounded, so it's not a complete replacement. However, there only really needed to be one of these moves because they're never really used anyway. Next up, we have moves that are outclassed by others. This is kinda a subset of overlap, but when the move is a downgrade rather than a side grade. Bestow, which gives a Pokemon your held item, is outclassed by Trick, which will not fail if the target is already holding an item. Bone Club is outclassed by Bone Meringue and Bulldoze. So with it being removed, Marowak could still keep one of its signature moves and not really lose anything in return. Bubble is outclassed by Water Gun in most cases. Bubble is a spread move and can lower speed, but for the most part, it's really easy just to have Water Gun as an early game water type move. Water Gun is also the more iconic move by far. Dual Chop, which is a dragon type dual wing beat, is outdone by Dragon Claw. Dual wing beat makes more sense to be in the game because flying has a very poor move variety, though dual wing beat was introduced in Gen 8, so it avoided this entirely. Gear Up is outdone by Shift Gear on Klinklang and Calm Mind on Magearna. This move may have actually not made it into Scarlet and Violet because Klinklang isn't in the game, but that's not entirely clear. Grass Whistle is just a worse sleep powder. Hyper Fang gets outclassed by Body Slam. Jump Kick gets outclassed by High Jump Kick and Close Combat. Mirror Shot and Mud Bomb get outclassed by Flash Cannon and Mud Shot. Though this one I don't feel so good about because it seems like they just culled the most moves with 65 base power and 85 accuracy. Mud Sport and Water Sport are not only bad effects on their own because most of the Pokemon that get them already resist electric or fire in some way, but also because you could just use Lightning Rod or set up Rain and get the same effect but with more benefit. Razor Wind is gimmicky and worse than Double Edge, though the distribution is pretty different here. Refresh is outdone by Heal Bell, but Refresh has way more PP, which could be useful for PP stalling. Revenge is outdone by Close Combat. Close Combat always has 120 base power and is not dependent on your opponent. A clone of Revenge, Avalanche, is in the game, and Ice does not have a widely distributed 120 base power physical move. Rock Climb is worse than Body Slam, and also a former HM that serves no purpose anymore. Skull Bash is on a ton of Pokemon that would probably just prefer Double Edge or don't really need normal stab. It's still a cool move though. Submission is a fighting type version of Stone Edge, but the only reason that Stone Edge is needed is because Rock doesn't have close combat. Lastly, Wake Up Slap competes with Brick Break, which is much better and more widely distributed. Moves that get outclassed by another are ones I'm probably the saddest to see go because I do think they serve a valuable part in filling out progression in the game. The only consolation here is that there are still plenty of bad or mid moves to fill out the mid game. Next up are moves that aren't too gimmicky or competing with another move directly, but were on few enough Pokemon that Game Freak might have decided that it was better to lose these moves than a move that a ton of Pokemon have or rely on. Ice Ball isn't on that many ice types, all things considered, and Rollout is a common enough replacement in most cases. Karate Chop isn't on that many Pokemon and sees a lot of competition from moves like Double Kick or Rock Smash, which are similar in base power and widely distributed. Leaf Tornado competes with Magical Leaf, though they have enough differences for me to think this is more of a distribution thing. Mat Block is only on Throw and Greninja, so its removal only affected 2 Pokemon. Also, there is a chance this comes back if Throw is in a future game. Needle Arm is unique in that it's a physical grass move with middling base power, but it's only on a few Pokemon. Spider Web is a trapping move that not only competes with Mean Look, but is also on 3 evolutionary lines. Steamroller only exists on a few Pokemon, and there are plenty of better moves that give a 30% chance to flinch. Twin Needle competes with Bug Bite and Fell Stinger, but has a weaker effect and narrower distribution. Last in this category, we have Vital Throw, which is an interesting effect, and there isn't really a move exactly like it. For those of you who don't know, Vital Throw reduces the priority of the move by 1, but never misses. But it just wasn't on enough Pokemon to be worth keeping. Also, every Pokemon that learns it by level up, except for Hariyama, is not in Scarlet and Violet, so there is a chance it comes back in the future. Next up are moves that are never used. Most of these do have low distribution, but just happen to have no good users for those moves. Also, many of the gimmick moves could fit in this category. Constrict is a 10 base power move that has a chance to lower speed. I checked multiple times that this move isn't a multi-hit move or doesn't work like Wrap or something, but it's just that bad. Egg Bomb is a 100 base power, 75 accuracy move that is only available to Executor and Chansey, who are not really on the lookout for physical normal moves. It's also on Mew, but Mew has a million better moves to use. Heart Stamp is a physical psychic move that only appears on special attackers. Magnet Bomb is a 65 base power, 85 accuracy move that is only on special attackers or Pokemon with better moves. Meditate is mostly on special attacking psychic types. Psywave is a neat gimmick, but its inconsistency is its downfall. Seismic Toss and Nightshade are still in the game despite doing mostly the same thing, and are even used on a few Pokemon that don't really have good attacking stats. Rage is a bad gimmick that is really only used to softlock on Lorelei in Gen 1. Sharpen is only on the Porygon line, which are all special attackers. If a Porygon 2 has an attack boost, it's not happy about it. Lastly, Synchronoise is a disaster of a move that only affects Pokemon that share at least one type with the user. This one is very gimmicky and just had to go. Second to last here, we have moves that I believe were held back due to potential problems implementing them. I alluded to this with Camouflage, Nature Power, and Secret Power, though I'm not entirely confident in those. Eternabeam got left out because they didn't want to bring Eternamax Eternatus's model into Gen 9, especially for a move that sucks. Technically, this is not guaranteed to be the case, but that's the narrative I believe, alright? Pursuit has caused problems in the past, being the move that used to cause Acid Rain, a very well-known glitch from Gen 4. Pursuit was likely always a difficult move to implement because of how it has different priority depending on if a Pokemon is switching out. It's unfortunate because Pursuit is actually a pretty important move in competitive. Switching out is usually a guaranteed way to protect whichever Pokemon is switching, but Pursuit is able to deny that, especially considering Ghost and Psychic types that are weak to it tend to be physically frail, meaning a Dark type could trap them on the field. Pursuit is a very important move that I kinda wish didn't get removed, but I get it. I wouldn't want to deal with all that debugging either. Imagine this move in early Scarlet and Violet. The game would crash every time you used it. Lastly, we have moves that I believe were taken out for some sort of balancing reason or for the health of the game. Assist could also very easily fit into gimmick moves, but I think with the amount of new signature moves and strong moves in general, they thought it best to remove it so that there is never a chance of ending up in an exploitative state with this move, like we saw with the Dive Cat strategy from way back in the day. Dragon Rage and Sonic Boom were anomalies that I think never really fit in the game at the levels they are effective. The player usually doesn't have access to them, so the player experience is just getting one shot without much counterplay, and by the time the player gets them, they're usually not as good. Frustration and Return were strong moves with no drawback that were available to almost any Pokemon. I think Game Freak removed them to better control who gets good normal stab. This was a bit of a blow to normal types who now needed to run Double Edge and suffer recoil, and any Pokemon that want to have good normal coverage without having access to Double Edge. This also affects Pokemon that have Galvanize or Aerialate or things like that, which now that Megas are coming back, they're really gonna miss Return. Similarly, Hidden Power was also removed, which I believe was to control the distribution of special attacks. A lot of people don't like the removal of Hidden Power, and I understand why, but I think it was for the best. Many special attackers use Hidden Power to cover up holes in their moveset, and in a best of one closed team sheet format, it can be very difficult to cover all the options. If Hidden Power was still in the game, think of how much worse Terra Blast would be on special attackers. I think being able to cover up your moveset like that should come at some sort of cost. Overall, removing Hidden Power makes it so that Pokemon can't break out of their intended specializations as easy, which gives other Pokemon the ability to fill in those gaps. Ominous Wind and Silver Wind introduced variants in a way that Game Freak likely didn't like that much. Even though these moves were hardly ever used, Game Freak probably didn't like how swingy they could be. I know Ancient Power makes this seem far less likely because Ancient Power is still in the game. However, I think it's different for two reasons. One, Ancient Power is an evolutionary move. Pokemon like Mamoswine need it to evolve. And two, Rock has like no special attacks. So it's a lot more costly for them to remove Ancient Power than it is for them to remove Ominous Wind or Silver Wind. Power Up Punch provides a lot of value, but outside of Mega Kangaskhan, it was never that crazy. This was probably a preemptive balance decision made so they didn't need to always account for Power Up Punch in the future when developing abilities like Opportunist or Co-Star. Lastly, Sky Drop causes one Pokemon to bring another into the sky and prevent it from moving until next turn when it is brought back down. It is a move that gives one player too much control over the action economy. It's similar to Fake Out in that it has one player sacrifice their move to prevent another Pokemon from moving, but the conditions make it far more spammable from Fake Out. With Fake Out, if you protect, then it's not like the Pokemon can use Fake Out on the next turn, but a Sky Drop Pokemon can just use it again. There is counterplay in that you can't Sky Drop a fat Pokemon, but not every Pokemon can make themselves fat enough. This was used in competitive a lot, and likely would have continued to be used, but I think that it's good that it's gone. And that's it. No, it's not. I found a few more moves that weren't listed on the source I was using for one reason or another. Sky Uppercut, which is not really learned until level 40, at least for most Pokemon that get it, is going to be competing with close combat. We're at 7th or 8th gym territory there, so an 85 base power 90% accurate move is just not going to cut it. Grudge, which is kind of the definition of a niche gimmick, it's kind of a mix of Destiny Bond and Spite, where if you use Grudge and a Pokemon knocks you out on that turn, they'll lose all the PP of whatever move they use to knock it out. It's very niche. It can have some applications, but most of the time Spite is just going to be easier to use. Rolling Kick is a low distribution move. It's only given to Hitmonlee, Hitmontop, and Marshadow. It's also a 60 base power, 85% accurate fighting type move. It could go pretty easily. And last one that I found is Snatch. Now, Snatch is gimmicky, and I only really remember it from like Team Plasma's Lipard using it, and it would always fail. But basically, it steals a status move from an opponent. This could be quite good status moves like Aurora Veil, Bulk Up, Calm Mind, things like that. So there are applications for it in competitive, though I haven't heard of anyone really missing it, even though it definitely could be used to either catch your opponent off guard or, dissuade them from using stat boosting moves. So those are all the ones that I found. I hope there's no more. I tried using good sources to the best of my ability, multiple sources and double checking and cross-referencing. But if there's any more, please let me know in the comments. Yeah, I'll let me get back to my outro now. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, you probably enjoy my content. I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel. I would really like to hit 10K this year. Also, if you enjoy this video, I recommend another video of mine where I talk about Pokemon that power crept others. That being said, thank you very much for watching. Good luck in your future games and have a good one.